Welcome back. Panelists here. Robert Costa of the Washington Post and moderator of Washington Week on PBS. Danielle Pletka of the American Enterprise Institute. Kimberly Atkins, chief Washington reporter and columnist for the Boston Herald. And Jon Meacham, author of the new book, The Soul of America, The Battle for Our Better Angels. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Let me start with your colleague, Robert Costa, Dan Balls, and what he wrote on Friday morning. It's sort of the larger reaction to everything we've learned. Does it bother anyone that President Trump has been caught lying? Does it bother anyone that this is not new? Does it bother anyone that the president has been shown to be a liar? That was Dan Balls' lead. That's not somebody who throws the L word around. This is where we're at.
Dan Balls, one of the best, and he brings up an important question, but for Republicans I'm covering, they still do not seem to be breaking with President Trump. Just months ahead of the midterm elections, they've bought the ticket, they're taking the ride, they're sticking with President Trump, but for those suburban voters in the country who watch all of this with Stormy Daniels, the misstatements, lies, you do wonder, do the voters who may have went from the middle to President Trump in 2016, do they flip back this year?
Danielle, the Wall Street Journal editorial page on Friday, Paul Gigot and company. Mr. Trump is compiling a record that increases the likelihood that few will believe him during a genuine crisis, say a dispute over speaking with special counsel Robert Mueller or a nuclear showdown with Kim Jong-un. Mr. Trump should worry that Americans will stop believing anything he says.
So this should bother us from the standpoint of leadership. As Americans, we want a president who we can trust. That, I think, is very separate from the political question that Robert just brought up, which is what do the American people think for the midterms? And I think the answer to that is they're not listening. This is just so much chatter. Who cares about the person you call a porn actress? Who cares about all these lawyers and all these people who are pimping themselves out on cable TV? Sorry.
No, that's the part from the two interviews. On one hand, Kimberly, it's what is this about? And then on one other hand, why is the president afraid to tell us what happened?
Well, and it's also this idea that a lot of people still believe that this is some sort of attack on the presidency. They're buying into this narrative that the government, that the FBI, that the investigators are somehow turned into a political operation to attack the president, and that is resonating. I think that's one reason the fatigue over all of this, plus that message landing with some people. Why we've actually seen his poll numbers tick up recently. People are getting tired of this. They don't want to hear about the porn star anymore. And it's troubling at a time where simultaneously this White House has a terrible problem with the truth. It always has. It's getting is exacerbated. So you're seeing this division increase, but we don't even know what the political impact will be.
John?
It took 4 years to get McCarthy. It took 3 years to get Andrew Johnson. It's a dark moment, but I really do think at a certain point, you're right, people are not thinking as much about this as the political class. The reason he's president is a lot of people didn't believe what even more conventional presidents have said recently, right? He's president because of the 10 national tickets, 8 had a Clinton or a Bush on them. They were basically saying to Washington, if you're going to act like a reality TV show, I guess what, we'll send you a real one. And so I think the polls I'm skeptical of. I do know this historically, and I think we all know it intuitively. The presidents who get in trouble in the fullness of time are those who think they can put a fast one past the people. And I think this will have a cumulative effect.
And what is that fast one? When I'm talking to the people closest to President Trump, they say the unemployment rate dips below 4%. We're having these talks with North Korea. But they still fear, even his closest allies, that if he moves to impeach or fire Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who oversees the Mueller probe, if he makes some kind of drastic action with regards to these investigations, all of that other issues, all the other policies that are going on, they could fade away and you could have a crisis. And that's what really animates this White House internally.
Danielle, I read something this morning that I thought would just make you nuts because I think it's true because of the sort of the cynicism. Ross Dowdett wrote this about, the best thing the Republican Party has going for him is their lack of an agenda. And he notes the most important boost may be coming from inside his own party in the form of totally non-existent agenda that congressional Republicans have put forward since the tax bill passed. That non-existence, of course, an indictment of the GOP, but politically, it's vastly preferable to the deeply unpopular legislation that Republicans might otherwise be pursuing. His point being, voters or the Democrats don't focus on health care and some of these other economic issues because Michael Avenatti, Stormy Daniels, the Mueller probe is coloring it all, and Republicans aren't paying a price for not doing anything.
Well, you were totally right. That does drive me crazy, because now is a moment of great opportunity for Congress that they have completely squandered. Yes, they got the tax bill, but they've done almost nothing else with their majority. The Republicans haven't. And of course, this is, it's true. This is a great distractor for the Democrats as well. They don't have an agenda either. This is Clinton redux. It's enough. The American people will see as a scumbag and they'll vote for us. That's going to hurt the Democrats for sure. But the Republicans are in exactly the same place. They're doing nothing.
Harry Truman once said in his retirement that we get the government we deserve. And I think that's important here. I think that we have to think.
Yeah, we made this over 20 years, didn't we?
At what point are politicians more mirrors of the country than molders? And far more often, they mirror it. And right now, only 17% of the country trusts the federal government to do the right thing. That's a number that's pre-Trump.
Right.
I think that it's a broader question here than I think Trump is the apotheosis, if you can use that in the same sentence with Trump, of the issue. But
Bob,
it's a question of trust.
Bob Costa, before I let you go, does the morale in the West Wing, it was my understanding that not being able to stick to the Stormy Daniels story was really going to undermine a lot of morale. A lot of people lied for the president on this, and it bothers them, and we've been hearing it. How's that playing inside that West Wing?
You mentioned the West Wing. Inside the West Wing, there's the West Wing, and then there's President Trump. They really feel like they're isolated from their own president. With the Giuliani situation this week, it was the president communicating with Giuliani, not communicating with the broader staff. And that worries this White House because they're trying to get out in front of these issues, yet it's the president as his own communications director, as his own strategist.
Well, I mean, how is that different than how since the inauguration day? The president has always laid out his own agenda. The people around him have to catch up. The facts are never a relevant thing. And so I don't see how this is that much different. Why have you seen the sort of turnover that you've seen within the White House?
What is it, the 26th floor he used to work at? Was that his office?
26th floor.
The 26th floor is back. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.